Hello, everyone. This is Howard Fox, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Dr. Brian Joseph is our guest today. Brian is a global veterinarian, public servant, educator, and author. And that's just putting it very lightly, folks, but you're going to hear more in a second. And I just am very excited to have come across Brian's profile on Podmatch, which is one of the sources I get guests from as we were looking to really get some more guests from a variety of the conservation, education parts of the outdoor space. And so, Brian, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. And by the way, that is a wonderful sweater that you're wearing. I love it.
Well, thank you, Howard. Thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation.
Fantastic. Now, since you are wearing a sweater, I do realize Halloween is coming up, but where are you located?
I'm located in Gig Harbor, Washington, about an hour south of Seattle. And I wear sweaters like this because I find a hard time being an adult all the time.
Something I think more people would benefit from being less of an adult and just having fun and being caring and to each other and to our wild animals out there, and marine and land-based animals.
I agree completely, and being more caring about each other as well.
Exactly. Now, I am curious. I did introduce you as Dr. Brian Joseph. I would love, there's so much to chat about, but I would love just perhaps a 30,000-foot view of, give us a little bit of your background. So just to create some context for our conversation today.
Sure. I've been blessed with a very interesting life. I started out in San Diego, California. I started out as an animal keeper at the San Diego Zoo, then an animal keeper at SeaWorld, went to veterinary school. After that, I've worked either part or full-time at about 40 zoos and aquariums around the world. I still do work for about, 12 aquariums, including the Seattle Aquarium. I also was Washington State veterinarian for 5 years. I was an Army veterinarian for 10 years, and I'm involved with a nonprofit called Livestock International that helps people in developing countries.
Okay. And how did you get your first job as a zookeeper? What is one of those requirements that you needed for them to let you loose and working with the animals?
Sure, the requirements are different today than when I started, because I started 51 years ago. And at that time, very few zookeepers had gone to college at all. I'd gone to college for 2 years, dropped out, did construction work, and I was lucky enough to get a part-time job at the San Diego Zoo, which was a dream job for me. My hero was Dr. Charles Schroeder, who was director of the San Diego Zoo from 1956 to 1974. And very rapidly, I worked my way into a full-time job, went back to college on my days off, and worked on from there.
Okay. Now, I have been to the San Diego Zoo once, a lot of walking. I remember that, but from my lens, and I seem to recall, it was always this. It was the benchmark for zoos that were more of the immersive experience than here's the lion exhibit, here's the aquatic exhibit, here's the ape exhibit, and that was pretty unique in its time as it grew. Is that still the case?
It is the case. It's one of the several zoos that have really changed over my career. Zoos went from having, in effect, a postage stamp collection with interesting animals to conservation work. In San Diego Zoo, the Brookfield Zoo, the Shedd Aquarium, a lot of the major zoos do wonderful work with conservation and educating children, which is oftentimes more important than field conservation.
Okay. Now, you just name dropped two of my favorite zoos of all time. Now, I grew up in Detroit, so we had the Detroit Zoo, not too far from where I lived in Oak Park, but I grew up right near the Shedd Aquarium, I spent half my life near the Shedd Aquarium when I lived in Chicago and out at Brookfield Zoo. And is there a flavor for these museums, these zoos, whether it's the Shed or Brookfield, do they have their own identity, or or is it some element of like a cookie cutter, or is it again very unique identity?
I believe that every zoo and aquarium has a unique identity, which is shaped by their culture and by their leadership at the top. So, person can say, "Well, I've been to a zoo," but they're all different. And there's some very wonderful immersive zoos out there. And they also spend a lot of their money on conservation outside the United States.
With the work that you have been doing, again, as you then went on to the veterinary school, where did you decide that you're going to focus your energy once you got through the program?
Sure. And that really happened more or less by life leading me rather than a conscious decision. When I left SeaWorld, went to veterinary school, I wasn't sure I'd ever work in a zoo or aquarium again. But I had an opportunity to come back to SeaWorld as an intern and then a resident veterinarian. Before I knew it, I was consulting at more than one zoo. So I've had a really privileged career to move from place to place and work with some of the most dedicated people you'll ever meet and try to make a difference.
Okay. Now, with a zoo, and I think about the variety of animals, the birds, the primates, even the elephants, and I'm thinking, I think the Chicago Zoo, no, the Chicago Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago closed down its elephant exhibit. But what are the challenges of a zoo of that type, being a veterinarian or in charge of the veterinary team versus being in an aquarium where, I mean, you can't do I don't know how you check the heart rate of a of a whale or a fish. And
Sure.
what's the difference there?
Okay, that's a great question. And the great opportunity and challenge of working in a zoo or aquarium is the diversity of animals you have. So a zoo or aquarium veterinarian can't be a specialist. They can't be a cardiologist. They can't be a surgeon. They've got to be pretty good at everything and able to bring in specialists. Now, today, just because where life has led me, I work mostly in aquariums, and aquarium veterinary medicine has expanded tremendously. For example, at the Seattle Aquarium, where I work a day or two a week, we have ultrasonography, we have endoscopy, we do anesthesia on fish, we take blood on fish, we treat fish every day. So when I go back to the start of my career, that wasn't the case. Fish were just fish, but now they receive the same standard of care that mammals have received for many decades.
All right. I want to jump into this question. How do you perform those procedures that you just described in the aquarium? I don't get it.
Well, it depends on the size of the animal. With some of the animals, such as stingrays and sharks, you can actually do some training. You can train them for voluntary procedures, but more often we use sedation. We sedate them just like the doctors that sedated me yesterday for a procedure. And once
Okay.
they're asleep and you ventilate them with water, you breathe for them, you can do ultrasonography, you can take blood, you can do endoscopy, you can do radiography. So as I say, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that would have been unheard of. But the standard of veterinary medicine in aquariums has advanced tremendously.
I am like wowed by just the idea that we can do that. I would never have thought that.
Sure.
What do you see as the challenges for these these uh, these fish that are in captivity in the aquarium versus as we go outside the aquarium into the freshwater or seawater? What are the challenges that they're facing?
Sure, that's a great question. So we'll look at the wild environment first. Only about 5% of all the water on Earth receives any protection whatsoever. And most of our major fisheries, they're collapsing due to overfishing. Now, if
Mm.
we look on the aquarium side, aquariums have started to transition from being consumers, collecting wild fish, to aquaculture, raising fish. But the biggest challenges you have in a facility are things like construction, utilities, care, because you have to maintain a wonderful environment to keep the animals healthy. So that's where most of the money goes, is trying to keep the animals alive and healthy.
And how does fundraising take place? Because I have to imagine, I mean, I know what my insurance costs are on the medical side, and trust me, it's a hard pill to swallow, literally. Where does the money come from to
Sure.
provide that level of care?
That's a great question too. So there aren't very many city or county zoos left in the United States because operating expenses and construction costs are
Mhm.
so high. So most of the zoos and aquariums today are nonprofits, and
Mhm.
they have a very large fundraising department that works with the community. And they wouldn't be able to do what they do without that fundraising, without benevolent donors. I used to be a chief operating officer of a museum. I was director of a zoo in Canada, and you have to work with donors and you have to convince them not just that the animals are important, but they're important for their children and their grandchildren. That they're really a gift for all of us.
Okay. Now, I had the pleasure 2 years ago, yeah, 2 years ago, interviewing the National Marine Sanctuaries, a number of the sanctuaries, because they were celebrating their 50th anniversary. Do you ever cross paths with organizations like that in terms of conservation, education, stewardship types of activities?
We do. We work extensively with the regulatory agencies and the conservation agencies because we really have very similar goals. We have a different product, you could call it, because they're
Mhm.
out in the natural environment, whereas we have millions of guests come to see us every year. So we
Mhm.
have a very broad audience. Now, if that entire audience tried to go to the wild, there wouldn't be a wild anymore. So
Right.
not everybody can go out in the marine sanctuary. Not everybody can go to Africa to look at elephants. But if we can bring them to the people in an appropriate manner with good welfare, perhaps we can change their thoughts.
Okay. What is a typical day for you when you're spending time at your local zoo? What's that look like?
Sure. So a typical day when I go to the Seattle Aquarium is, as I say, I work a day or two a week, so I'm not a
Right.
full-time employee. But as
Right.
soon as I get there, I review all the communication for the week and I review the cases for the week. And then the first thing I do will do what we'll call rounds, just like you do in the hospital if you're a physician in the hospital. I walk
Mhm.
through the entire collection. I talk to all the aquarists, look at all the clinical cases. And after that, if there's clinical cases to work on, then I'll take that on and take care of those clinical cases. So there is one of the wonderful things about working in a zoo or aquarium for someone like me is there's no typical day. You never know what to expect. And also, you never finish learning. You're learning your entire career.
Mhm. Speaking of learning, for someone with your background experience, what does that learning look like for you?
Sure, I was very lucky because I spent 7.5 years as an animal keeper before I went to veterinary school. So I
Mhm.
had the opportunity to learn a lot about nutrition, normal behavior, and one of the most important things a veterinarian can learn is what is normal behavior for a species.
Mhm.
So then in veterinary school, where I went to University of California at Davis, we had one of the best programs in zoo and aquarium medicine.
Mhm.
So learning continued. And then learning continued when I went to SeaWorld as an intern. We have professional conferences that we attend. We have online training, tremendous collaboration between zoo and aquarium veterinarians. People decide you have a certain expertise and they contact you and vice versa. For a long time, people thought I was a kangaroo expert. I have no idea why, but I got kangaroo calls all the time. And I used to get baby gorilla calls all the time. So you learn it's a small pool. We're talking about a few hundred people. And so you learn who your colleagues are and you learn who can learn from.
Okay. So thinking about expertise, so if who would be your typical caller asking for your advice, your perspective, or to join in on a case? Who are I say the ideal patients for you?
Sure, sure. So I'm the North American veterinarian for Merlin Entertainment. Merlin Entertainment has 10 aquariums in the United States. Each one of those aquariums has a local veterinarian, but they can also reach out to me for assistance. And I
Mhm.
visit each one of those aquariums every year. And the reason for that is to maintain a close relationship with the staff and to do quality control of the program. So those are the folks that reach out to me most often. Then at Seattle Aquarium, we have a young veterinarian that I work with. And so she'll reach out to me as well.
Okay. We look outside of the states or North America, and perhaps you get into Africa, Asia, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about the nonprofit that you're part of. Where is your energy going there for some of the endangered animals that are out there, the big Africa's big five, for example? Where are you finding your time being directed towards?
Well, currently, I don't have any projects like that. But some of the most meaningful projects I've worked on the last few years have been with people.
Okay.
Myself and a colleague, Corey Brown, who runs an organization called Livestock International, nonprofit. We had a
Mhm.
4-year project in Iraq and Kurdistan, and we trained Iraq and Kurdish veterinarians in transboundary disease detection and control. Transboundary diseases are diseases that cross borders and
Mhm.
affect the bottom line. Now, those veterinarians that we trained, they went out and they trained 2,000 farmers.
Mhm.
So the Iraqis and the Kurds did the work. They made a difference. So a lot of what I do now has to do with the wildlife livestock interface
Mhm.
because livestock pick up wildlife disease. They transmit disease to livestock. So I
Mhm.
work with folks on that quite a lot now.
Okay. No, I couldn't help but noticing there's a bunch of frames behind you that have a lot of badges and a
Oh,
couple
yes.
medals. So that kind of leads into which I read on the website about you had a little stint in the U.S. Army Reserve in the Veterinary Corps, and there was something really unique about it. I think. I don't. What was?
It's an interesting story, and it's one that I don't think will ever be repeated. So
Okay.
I, I was at a veterinary conference, 2007, and the Army had a dog there, military working dog. His name was Ringo. He was at the recruiter's booth. If the dog wasn't there, I would never stop. I
Okay.
stopped and I talked to the dog. I talked to the recruiter. And what caught my attention, because I'm one, a very defiant person, and two, I'm not a military oriented person,
Mhm.
was the about 75 humanitarian missions the Army Reserve was doing per year around the world. So I
Mhm.
talked to the guy for 2 hours, called my wife. She came down and she said, I think you'd like to do that. So I applied at 56 years of age to join the Army Veterinary Corps. Now, it took 2 years for me to get in because they rejected my application. I was 10 years too old when I applied.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I had a friend, Ross Perot, that I had done a favor involving leopard sharks. And
Okay.
Ross Perot called General Casey, who was Army Chief of Staff during the Iraqi War. And Ross said, why won't you let this young man serve his country? So at 58 years of age, I went through basic training. I was the oldest veterinarian that's ever joined the Army, the oldest veterinarian ever served. I came out at 68 years old. During that time, I did 3 combat deployments and 4 humanitarian missions. So it was a way of paying back for the life I have. The life I have is due to where I was born, not because I'm special, but it gave
Right.
me the opportunity to go to Afghanistan, to Qatar, to Djibouti, Central African Republic, DRC, South Sudan, Somalia, Guatemala, Belize, and work with people as well as military animals.
Okay. I love that. And Ross Perot, that name is not lost on me. I believe I spent a little stint with his company a
Mhm.
long time ago. So there's a little degree of separation there. As you look back on the experience in this work within the armed services, is there an event or two that really just continues to stand out for you as like, wow, I can't believe I was here doing that.
There are several. One of them was in Afghanistan. It was a privilege to work with the military working dog. Luckily, on my side of the country, the western side, we had no fatalities. But on the eastern side, where the rest of my unit was, they did. And the fatality of one of those military working dogs, it struck all of us as hard as if it was one of our fellow soldiers.
Mhm.
Now, some of the work I was lucky enough to do in Africa, I was with Special Forces for 8 months, and we were working with the indigenous population. And I had an opportunity to be out in the rural areas with in the jungle where people had no medical care whatsoever. They had no protection whatsoever. To see child graves by every hut, see people's family, 100% malaria. So it gave me a perspective on what life is like in much of the world. And that's one of the drivers for my work with a nonprofit.
Okay. Very good. As you have now come back and you're settling into Gig Harbor, I am curious, do you have pets?
I do. I have two Bernese mountain dogs at the moment, summer and autumn, and a cat named Kitten Ann. And then I have a grand dog who's right at my feet named Olive. So yes, I always have pets.
I love it. And I think I was chatting with another coach the other day, and I was attending some coach training, and I was lamenting it. It's sometimes lonely. I sit at a desk, I talk to people, but it's lonely, and I miss having a dog sitting
Mhm.
at your feet while you're working. So I need to do something about that.
Well, they're
But
for me, they're fur angels, and I just finished my second book about dogs.
yeah,
First one was I wish the Rainbow Bridge had visiting hours. That came out
yeah,
in March.
yeah.
My second one will be out in 2 weeks, and it is I wish there weren't so many paw prints on the Rainbow Bridge. And the third book that I'm working on is going to be about my 10 years in the Army.
Excellent. Now, what was it like to suddenly decide I'm going to write a book, or how did that decision get made?
Well, I've done a lot of writing. I've done a lot of technical writing, professional
Yeah.
writing, and I'm constantly doing presentations at conferences, veterinary schools. About, about 3 years ago, I was working in Kurdistan and I
Okay.
got very ill. I actually went into shock and I was unconscious for 3 hours in an ER in Kurdistan. And on the way there, I didn't think I was going to survive. And I was okay with that. I've had a very full life. But on the way there, I thought, I don't write down some of these stories about the animals that have blessed my life and the people have blessed my life, I never will because my runway is getting short. So every chance I get, I spend time writing today.
Okay. And the writing process for you, and going to assume these are children's books, or are they more adult oriented?
They're adult books, actually,
Okay.
and they
Okay.
are. And the whole purpose of them is that as long as these animals and the people that I write about, as long as someone reads their names, they're never really gone. And it
Okay.
gives people a chance to read what animals have meant to me, the loss that you sustain when an animal dies, and also the joy they give you when they're alive.
It's interesting. I just had a podcast interview. In fact, I think it was the very last episode, as a matter of fact. Bo Beasley, he is a first responder out in it's either Carolinas or Virginia. I should know
Hmm.
this. Uh, but he sponsors a fly fishing and wine festival, basically to help veterans who are coming back from
Hmm.
service learn how to fly fish, and basically the comfort around the fishing experience, the fly fishing experience, kind of like the Zen. And I think there's the same perspective as you're just describing, because our pets and the stories of what they mean to us are very comforting. And I don't know anybody that hasn't had a pet and talk about the Rainbow Bridge. And I just think it's wonderful. And for somebody like me who doesn't have a pet, makes me really envious and want to go out and find a way to have a pet in my life. And so I love that. And we'll definitely provide the backlinks to the book
Thank you.
in our show notes. And when the third book comes out, just let us know. We'll add that as well. So you're back home. Does your wife like having you around now?
Sometimes
Okay.
when I was gone for a long time, such as when I was in Africa with the Army, I was supposed to be gone 6 months.
Yeah.
And things went so well that they said, how would you like to stay 2 more months? So I called my wife and she said, she's very, very rational, straightforward person. I don't care if you ever come back, you're not eating my food, you're not spending my money. So the challenge for my wife, who is incredibly supportive and independent, is not when I'm gone, it's when I come back. I have to be
Okay.
very careful to not be underfoot. So I have an office on the other side of the garage. I work there during the day, spend my evenings with her.
Okay. And how do you two spend your evenings enjoying each other's company?
We watch a lot of movies and we pet the dogs. And one of the lessons the dogs are trying to teach me is to live in the moment. That's one of the joys of dogs is they live in the moment. They don't worry about last week. They don't worry about next week. They enjoy today. And I'm trying very hard to learn that from them.
Okay. Very good. So something else that I was reading on the website is you're also involved some way with this blue loop. I'm trying to understand more about what that is and what is and there's also I don't know if it's a contest or an acknowledgement, the Blue Loop 50. Can you share a little bit more about what that is?
I can't honestly because I'm not familiar with that.
You're kidding me.
No, I don't know how come it's on my website.
Okay. Well, you know something? It's really funny, but I'm going to give you the full honesty. I was
Sure.
preparing show notes before this, and it may very well be just a remnant of another of the other guests that I was preparing for. But
Well,
that's okay.
I
That's
could make
okay.
something up, but I'm
You
not
know,
going to.
you could make something up. You know, it's really funny. Oh God. Yeah, it's the no, this is your stuff, man.
What does it say about me?
This is the Blue Loop 50 influencers
Oh,
celebrates the world. Oh,
thank you.
oh, so you were having a moment there. Okay, so
Yeah,
you're
I'm not a kid. I have a lot of moments. So
see,
I don't know too much about that. That came at me last week.
okay,
And I don't know what the organization is. I don't know what the criteria is, but somebody sent me that message that there were 50 people in aquariums and zoos around the world that were selected as influencers. And
right,
somehow I was one of the people selected. And when
yeah,
it's got a picture of me there from
yeah,
when I was at the Assiniboine Park Zoo as director and head of the
okay.
International Polar Bear Conservation Center. So thank you for reminding me. I guess I should look at my website.
I mean, look, Brian, you had me going there for a second. It's like I said, I've coached 5 clients today. I had a
Okay.
podcast this morning, and my roommate and their boyfriend are running a garage sale.
Oh
Okay,
boy.
and
Oh
so I've
boy.
had a busy day, and
Yeah.
now here you are making me think I'm going
No,
bonkers. So
no,
all
you're
right,
not going bonkers. I'm going bonkers. I would have remembered, I could have played that one up and pulled your chain.
there you go. Well, you did yank it hard enough, let me tell you. So if we get back, let's have some fun. Like you had
Sure.
commented, I have for our listeners, as you all know, as I bring up a banner image and I have my logo up on the background instead of the green screen,
Sure.
is I'm in kind of like an immersive tunnel inside of an aquarium. And is there a method for visitors like me or for young kids when you're bringing people into these aquariums, is there a method to how you guide people through the experience?
Sure. Sure. A lot of organizations prefer to have a one-way path. And oftentimes it's based on following a drop of water from a mountain to a creek to a river to the ocean. Most of the time, or they might have a regional focus. You might go through South America, then you
Mhm.
go through Asia. Most of the time, much of that is lost on the guest
Mhm.
because, and from my viewpoint, it's okay that it's lost. Because when I've run zoos and aquariums, my focus has been I just want people to appreciate life. And if they
Mhm.
go away and they learn 3 things, and based on those 3 things, they want to live in better harmony with the earth, that's enough for me.
Okay. And when you do you do any traveling now? I mean,
I,
just voluntarily traveling with your wife, your kids, and
uh, well, my wife won't travel with me if I'm doing any work at all.
okay,
So the last time I took her on a vacation, and I'm not proud of this, was
okay.
1997.
Oh
Now
boy.
she Now she's gone on vacation by herself, but
Okay.
I do travel because I visit these aquariums. I went to Iraq, Kurdistan. I work with a dolphin facility in the Bahamas, trying to get a project going in Mongolia,
Mhm.
but she doesn't usually go with me. She goes on vacation by herself because I'm like a border collie. I
Uh,
can't sit still. I have
right.
to be busy.
Okay. And I would imagine if you're going to a new city you've never been into, you're probably going to make a beeline to the aquarium or to the zoo.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or to a veterinary school where I can speak to the students. So
Okay.
one of my messages to veterinary students today is they have a very special role on earth.
Hmm.
They're regarded as having a lot of credibility. They know a lot about animals. They know a lot about customer service, but they need to also focus on global issues and climate change, especially. Climate change is the biggest threat to global security. And all of
Hmm.
us need to be aware, and we all need to talk to people. We all need to encourage elected officials at every level to work towards more sustainability.
Okay. Are you active on that front? Because you have definitely have a voice, you have credibility.
And just about, well, at every veterinary conference I go to,
Okay.
I try to give a talk on climate change and its impact on agriculture.
Hmm.
Well, last year I did a talk for the first veterinary conference in Nairobi about
Hmm.
the impact of climate change on Africa, because it's very sobering. The people who have the least, who've done the least damage, people in the global south, are the people who are suffering the most from climate change.
Right. Do you feel that the message of we can't just sit idly on our at the back of the room with our hands sitting on our hands, that we have to be more activist oriented to make sure these issues are coming to the forefront and staying there?
Absolutely. Every one of us needs to be informed and needs to be an advocate and needs to apply to their own life how we live. I drive an electric car. I
Mhm.
try not to use plastic. Those are small things, but every chance I get, I speak to people who have influence and encourage them to address this. If you look at the United States, we have contributed more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere since the revolution than almost every other country combined. So
Right.
I feel that we have a responsibility to help other nations, and we can't just focus on today and the economy today. We have to focus on the future because life on earth depends upon it.
Mhm. And I think that's very profound because we are always in the moment. What's good for me right now? What do I need more of now? But 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, we have no sense of what are we leaving for our ancestor, our future progeny or yeah.
Right now, the United States this last year spent $240 billion on climate disasters.
Hmm.
Climate disasters are happening more frequently with
Hmm.
more intensity. Now, this is not news. The first person that talked about it was in the late 1800s. First
Hmm.
time I heard about it was in the 1960s. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, beginning about 1990, there was the war on science started, and it was
Hmm.
funded largely by the petroleum companies. And if
Right.
you look at scientists, there's been surveys done. 97% of scientists agree that climate change is due to man's activities. But if you ask the general public, they think scientists are unsure because the
Right.
war on science has convinced them, well, maybe it's really not real.
Right.
So it's a big deal. It's a big deal about our future, animals' future, the Earth's future. It is a big
Hmm.
deal.
Hmm. Do you have hope?
I always have hope. I'm an optimist. And one
Okay.
thing, Winston Churchill said this during World War II. He said, Americans always do what's right after they've tried everything else. And I think that is true, not just of Americans, but it's true of humans, is we have to push things right to the brink and then we'll solve a problem. So I am very optimistic, not hopeful, optimistic, which means we're going to cause change, positive change. We're not just going to hope for it. We're going to do it.
Very good. Well, it's impressive. I mean, the work that you're doing and have done, and we need more voices out there just like yours. And hopefully, if through this podcast episode, besides learning more about the blue loop, maybe our listeners will be exciting somebody to want to go and go to veterinary school, go to work in a volunteer in a zoo or an aquarium.
Absolutely. And volunteer in elementary schools because the children are our future. Adults have largely made up their mind. They're living their life. They're focused on paying their bills, but it's the children that will be the groundswell that will lead to change. I'm not, as I say, I'm not special. I'm lucky to be here,
Mhm.
and I'm lucky to have the opportunities that I have, and lucky to pay back for the life I have. And a lot of that credit goes to my lovely wife because she supports what I do, and she supports me being gone, and she encourages me to do more. So I'm very lucky to have her.
Fantastic. Now, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Sure, they can go to my website. We might learn something together
Okay.
about the blue loop.
Okay.
And I'm starting to post links to podcasts on there that I participate in.
Okay.
And if I get my act together, I'll also put together some little stories on a regular basis. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience. And if anybody has questions, they can email me through the website. You can contact me anytime. And thank you very much for your time, Howard.
Fantastic. Brian, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And really, it's just your work is inspiring. And this is a perfect fit for the Outdoor Adventure Series. So, again, thank you for your time. And again, congratulations on the Blue Loop 50 influencers.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm just lucky to be here, and I'm
All
lucky to
right.
meet you. It's nice to meet you, sir.
Fantastic. Listen, stay in the line. I'm going to do a real quick close and you and I can have a final chat. All right, folks. We have just been chatting with Dr. Brian Joseph, global veterinarian, servant, educator, author, and an award winner. I mentioned he's gotten a lot of awards
Yeah.
and accommodations and acknowledgments, but really, in all seriousness, the work that he has been doing and continues to do, it has an impact not only on our zoos, on our the aquariums, but also helping groups and cultures and countries around the world really becoming better stewards and having an appreciation for conservation and the stewardship, and also to enjoy the outdoors because we still want to enjoy it as well as the wildlife opportunities. Now, do go out to his website at brianjoseph.com, and we'll provide back a link to it as well as links to his books. And again, congratulations on those books. I wish the Rainbow Bridge had visiting hours, his first book, and then I wish the Rainbow Bridge had fewer paw prints. And we'll also have the third book once it's published. We'll update the show notes. As for us, you can find this episode on our website, outdooradventureseries.com. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn on our Outdoor Adventure Series pages, as well as on YouTube. And of course, you'll be able to listen to this episode wherever you get your podcast from. Just do a search on Outdoor Adventure Series. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there and have a phenomenal day. If you have a pet nearby, even if it's a cat, okay, go pet it, cuddle it, enjoy it being there for you. I know the dogs will enjoy that you're there for them. Cats, they just want to be left alone. I know that from my roommate. But just go out there, enjoy your pets, and be grateful that you have the time you have with them. All right, folks, we'll see you on another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.